It was all very new to me. My name is Camila, and I was 18 years old when everything began. I was extremely excited because we had just moved to Curitiba. My whole family was from here, but because of my father's job, we had spent 4 years living in Papanduva, Santa Catarina. We ended up renting a house in the Cidade industrial neighborhood. Despite the excitement, there was one thing that bothered me. There were other houses on the same lot. My mother was also hesitant, afraid that we might end up having problems with the neighbors. Even so, we made the move and went on with our lives. I had an older sister, Eliane, who had stayed behind in Papanduva, living at a friend's house because of her job. The idea was that, after some time, she would come live with us. In those very first few days, I ended up meeting a guy who completely swept me off my feet. At the time, we had been living there for about 2 weeks. It was a Saturday afternoon. I decided to stand in front of the gate watching the movement on the street. I still didn't know anyone, hadn't made friends with anyone, and spent a good part of my time alone. That was when that guy arrived on a motorcycle. He parked, got off the bike, opened the gate, wheeled it onto the lot, closed the gate, and only then took off his helmet. I watched discreetly. When he took off his helmet and looked directly at me, I felt a chill run through my entire body. He was incredibly handsome. It was a hard feeling to explain. It felt like vertigo. My heart started racing immediately. He gave me a quick glance and went inside his house. Even though we had been living there for 2 weeks, that was the first time I had seen him. I stayed standing in front of the gate, watching the street, until, some time later, I looked over at his house again. To my surprise, he was at the window, looking at me. I was startled. The most curious thing was that when he realized I was also looking, he didn't look away. Quite the opposite. He smiled. Shortly after, he left his house and came over to where I was. He greeted me with a friendly smile and asked, "Did you guys just move into the front house?" We talked for a few minutes. I told him my name was Camila, and he introduced himself as Sandro. The conversation flowed naturally until something strange happened. At a certain point, he simply stopped talking and just stared at me. But it wasn't a normal look. It was an intense, deep, almost hypnotizing gaze. I felt those butterflies in my stomach again. I felt completely self-conscious. I didn't know what to say. I tried to find any topic to break the silence, but no words came out. That was when I heard my mother calling me from inside the house. My father was very strict and extremely controlling. Just the fact that I was talking to a guy could already cause problems. Even though I wasn't doing anything wrong, I decided to end the conversation. I said goodbye to him and went inside. As I walked to the door, I felt that he was still watching me. My mother didn't even have to wait for my father to arrive. As soon as I walked in, she asked, "Who was that guy?" I replied that we were just talking, nothing more than that. But the truth is, from that moment on, his image wouldn't leave my head. After that day, whenever I heard the roar of that motorcycle, I found a way to look out the window or go out to the yard. Sometimes we didn't even talk. Just seeing him was enough. My heart raced every single time. Gradually, I began to realize that this simple curiosity was turning into a much bigger feeling, a feeling I still didn't know how to explain. After that first encounter, we saw each other again a few days later. We were in front of the gate again when he smiled and asked, "Do you want to go for a motorcycle ride with me?" My heart almost leapt out of my mouth. I had already imagined what it would be like to ride on that motorcycle, holding onto him. When he invited me, I didn't even think about the consequences. In that moment, I didn't think about my father, my mother, or anything else. I simply accepted. He handed me a helmet. I got on the back of the bike and wrapped my arms around his waist. As soon as I hugged him, I felt my entire body tremble. He took me to a small square, a quiet place, where we stayed talking for a long time. It was there that I realized even more how charming he was. We talked about simple things, laughed, and little by little, I lost my shyness. Suddenly he fell silent. He looked deep into my eyes and said, "You are very beautiful, you know. I'm dying to give you a hug." I was completely speechless. I couldn't even answer. Before I could say anything, he slowly approached. His face got closer and closer to mine. Before I knew it, his lips were already touching mine. It was my first kiss with him, and what a kiss! After that one, many others followed. Between one kiss and another, a tight hug, a gentle caress on the face, a shy smile. In that instant, I was certain I was completely in love. After some time, he made another invitation. He said he knew a more private place where we could be alone. I understood perfectly what he meant. But I didn't feel ready. It was the first time we were together like that. Besides, I had never been intimately involved with anyone. I explained that I wasn't ready yet. I noticed he was a bit frustrated, but he respected my decision. He didn't insist. We continued talking for a while longer, and when it started to get dark, he took me back home. Luckily, my parents didn't see us arriving. If my father had found out that I had gone out on a motorcycle with a guy, he certainly would have made a huge scene. Before we said goodbye, he held my hand and asked, "Can I see you again?" I smiled. Of course. The truth is, I could hardly wait for the next date. By that point, I was already completely in love. Over the following days, we met up several more times. We almost always went to the same square, all hidden from my parents. I would invent some excuse, slip out discreetly, and meet Sandro. Each date made my feelings grow even stronger, until on one of those afternoons, everything changed. We were at the square exchanging kisses and caresses when he brought up going to a more private place again. This time, he managed to convince me. I confess I was overcome with fear. At the same time, there was an enormous desire to experience that moment by his side. My heart felt torn between reason and desire. He reassured me the entire time. He told me I didn't need to be afraid, that everything would happen on my time. We ended up going to a motel. There, I gave myself to him for the first time. It was my first experience. I understood absolutely nothing about sex. I was insecure, nervous, and very scared. But Sandro was extremely patient, affectionate, respectful. He made me feel safe the entire time. Gradually, I relaxed. In the end, that moment turned out to be very special to me. After that first time, we continued seeing each other. As the weeks passed, we grew closer and closer. Each encounter further strengthened the feelings I had for him. Sandro always made a point of using protection. He said we needed to be careful to avoid an unexpected pregnancy. At that time, no one knew we were together. No one. I had just turned 18. I was still very young. I knew perfectly well that my father would never accept that relationship, even more so because Sandro was 24 years old. If my father found out, I didn't even want to imagine what would happen. Even so, I was living one of the happiest moments of my life. On one occasion, we went to his house. His parents weren't there. We spent the entire afternoon together. We made love for the first time in his bed. It was an unforgettable moment. I sincerely believed I had found the love of my life. Sometime later, my mother shared some news with us. My sister, Eliane, was finally coming to live with us. She had stayed in Papanduva because of her job, but now she had managed to get a transfer and would be arriving that very weekend. I was very happy. We had always been very close. She was 6 years older than me, and since we were little, she had always been my best friend. I missed her a lot. At that time, Sandro and I had already been together for about 6 months. Our relationship remained hidden from everyone. No one suspected absolutely anything. On Sunday, my father went to pick her up at the bus station. When she arrived home, it was a huge joy. We spent a good part of the day talking, catching up. But that same night, a conversation took place that left me deeply uneasy. We were alone in the bedroom when Eliane casually asked, "Do you know the guy who lives right in front?" My heart raced. I tried to play it cool. "Who?" She answered immediately, "Sandro." She paused for a moment and smiled. Wow, what a handsome man. When I arrived today, he was working on his motorcycle. He lifted his head to see who was coming into the yard and, my God, what beautiful eyes. In that instant, I felt a chill run down my spine. She kept talking naturally, having no idea what those words were provoking inside me. Seriously, I thought he was very handsome. "Do you know him?" In that moment, I wanted to tell the whole truth. I wanted to say that Sandro was my boyfriend, that we had already been together for months, that I loved him, that we had already shared moments that no one knew about. But fear spoke louder. If she mentioned anything to my parents, my father would end up finding out everything, and I knew very well what he was capable of. Because of that, I stayed silent. I only answered, "I know him by sight." She didn't suspect absolutely anything. The next day, I managed to meet Sandro for a few minutes. I told him about the entire conversation. I told him my sister had noticed him, that she had complimented his eyes, that she had found him handsome. I waited for some comment, some reaction, but Sandro just listened to everything in silence. He said absolutely nothing. That made me a bit restless. Even so, I tried to forget about it. With my sister's arrival, it became even harder to meet Sandro. Before, all I had to do was hear the noise of the motorcycle to slip out discreetly. Now, there was always someone around, either my mother, or my father, or my sister. The opportunities decreased significantly. I missed him, our dates, our kisses, our hugs, until on a Sunday morning, everything began to change. My mother and I went to church. When we returned around noon, the first thing I saw was a scene that made my heart freeze. Eliane was standing in front of the gate, talking with Sandro. The two seemed completely at ease. They were laughing, smiling, joking with each other. At certain moments, they even touched each other during the conversation. The impression I got was that they had known each other for a long time. My heart instantly tightened. I walked past them alongside my mother and went into the house. While helping prepare lunch, I couldn't think of anything else. My sister was still outside, talking to him, laughing with him. Time was passing, and she wasn't coming in. The longer it took, the worse I felt. I started imagining 1,000 things. I felt jealous, afraid, insecure, angry, even trying to convince myself that they were just talking. Something inside me said that something was wrong. That afternoon, I could barely eat. My mother noticed my silence. She asked several times if I was feeling sick. I just replied that I was tired. But the truth was different. My fear was starting to turn into despair. And, unfortunately, that was only the beginning. That afternoon, I tried to convince myself that it was all just my imagination. Maybe they were just talking. Maybe my sister was just being friendly. Maybe I was exaggerating. But deep down, something told me I wasn't. The afternoon went by. Lunch ended. My sister was still outside. From time to time, I would discreetly look out the window. They were still together. They talked as if they were old acquaintances. They laughed the whole time. My chest tightened more and more. I couldn't understand how this was happening. Of all people, her, my sister, the person I trusted the most. When night fell, I heard the noise of Sandro's motorcycle again. I looked out the window and saw that he was finally leaving. My heart sank. A few seconds later, Eliane came into the house. She walked in, smiling, with a different sparkle in her eyes. She seemed like the happiest person in the world. Since we shared the same bedroom, I waited until we were alone. I didn't even have to ask anything. She started talking on her own. She sat on the bed, took a deep breath, and smiled. "I think I'm in love." In that instant, I felt as if the floor had disappeared from beneath my feet. My heart raced. My throat went dry. Even knowing the answer, I asked with a trembling voice, "In love? With who?" She smiled even wider. "With Sandro." It was like taking a stab to the chest. She started talking non-stop. She told me they had spent the entire afternoon talking. She said he was polite, affectionate, fun, and very attentive. She spoke of him with an enthusiasm that destroyed me inside. Every word was a different pain. I just listened. I couldn't say absolutely anything. The tears insisted on appearing, but I made a huge effort to hold them back. I couldn't cry in front of her. She had no idea that Sandro was already the man I loved. When she finally turned off the light to sleep, I turned to the other side of the bed. I waited a few minutes until I was sure she had fallen asleep. Only then did I begin to cry. I cried softly, hiding my face in the pillow so no one would hear me. It was a pain that was hard to explain. I couldn't understand how Sandro could have done that to me, how he could spend months saying he loved me and suddenly show interest precisely in my sister. I spent the entire night awake, reliving every moment we had spent together, every kiss, every hug, every promise, every word. It all felt like a lie. The next morning, I woke up completely drained. Even so, I tried to act normally, but just looking at my sister was enough to remember what she had said the night before. A few days later, I started noticing that Sandro was showing up at our house more and more. In the beginning, he would invent some excuse. He'd say he was just passing by, that he needed to talk, that he had come to visit a neighbor, but soon he stopped hiding it. He started seeking out Eliane directly. The two began talking every day. I watched it all without being able to do absolutely anything. Every conversation was a blow. Every smile between the two felt like it was tearing a piece of me away. I even thought about seeking Sandro out. I wanted to ask why. I wanted to understand what had happened. I wanted to hear an explanation, but I never found the courage. Deep down, I was afraid of the answer, or worse, afraid of discovering that he had truly stopped loving me. Even suffering in silence, I kept that secret. Not my mother, not my father, not my sister. No one knew that Sandro had been my first love, my first kiss, my first man. And precisely because of that, the pain was even greater. I carried that suffering completely alone. Little did I know that the worst was yet to come. The days went by, and I continued suffering in silence. Whenever I saw Sandro and my sister together, I felt as if my heart was going to break all over again. I avoided being near them. When they talked in front of the house, I would invent any excuse to go inside. I couldn't bear to see them smiling at each other. Even so, I still fed a small sliver of hope. Maybe Sandro was just confused. Maybe at some point he would come talk to me. Maybe he would explain everything that was happening. But that never happened. One night, while we were all gathered in the living room, I heard someone clapping from outside. My father went to answer. When he opened the gate, I saw Sandro standing there. My heart raced. For a moment, I thought he had come to talk to me, that he was finally going to clarify everything. But all it took was seeing him walk in to realize I was completely wrong. He greeted my parents politely and asked permission to speak with them. Everyone sat down in the living room. I stayed there too, trying to hide my nervousness. Sandro took a deep breath, looked at my father, and said, "Mr. Antonio, I wanted to talk to you about something very important." My father signaled for him to continue. Then Sandro looked at Eliane, smiled, gently held her hand, and said the words that destroyed what still remained of my heart. "Eliane and I are dating." In that instant, I felt as if the world had stopped. My entire body lost its strength. I looked at him, hoping that, at least in that moment, he would show some regret. But no, he looked happy, very happy. My sister, too. She smiled, visibly moved, completely in love. My father stood up and shook Sandro's hand. My mother broke into a huge smile. The two of them congratulated the couple. They started making plans, talking about the future and wishing them happiness. Meanwhile, I remained motionless. I felt like screaming, like telling the whole truth, like saying that this man had been my boyfriend, that he had been my first kiss, my first love, that I had given myself completely to him. But no words came out of my mouth. The pain was too great. I started to feel out of breath. My chest felt squeezed by an invisible force. I stood up without saying anything and ran to my bedroom. As soon as I closed the door, I collapsed. I threw myself on the bed and cried like I had never cried before. It seemed that all the tears I had kept bottled up during those days decided to come out all at once. From outside, I could still hear the laughter. Everyone was celebrating, talking about the relationship, about how they made a beautiful couple, about their future. No one had any idea what was happening to me. No one knew that I was destroyed. That night I cried until I fell asleep, and when I woke up the next day, I realized that something inside me had changed forever. The cheerful, dreaming girl that existed within me seemed to have disappeared. In her place, only a profound sadness remained. I started avoiding Sandro as much as I could. When he showed up at the house, I locked myself in my room. If he had lunch with us, I would take my plate and eat alone in the kitchen or the living room. Any place was better than seeing them together. Even so, it was impossible to escape completely. Almost every day I saw my sister get on the back of that same motorcycle where I had been so many times. I saw Sandro put the helmet on her. I saw the two of them leaving, hugging, and with every scene, it felt as if they were occupying a space that had once been mine. I was only 18 years old. She was 24. Maybe that was it. Maybe he had realized it would be much easier to have an open, accepted relationship with someone his own age than to keep hiding with me. Maybe he had never truly loved me. I spent countless nights trying to find an answer, but no explanation lessened the pain. I continued suffering in silence, keeping a secret that no one would ever discover. After that day, life went on, or at least it did for the others. For me, everything seemed to have stopped. I continued living in the same house, watching Sandro come and go, always by my sister's side. Every time I saw them together, I felt a different kind of pain. It was as if my heart was forced to relive the same wound every single day. As the months passed, I tried to accept the situation. I told myself I needed to forget him, that it was just a phase, that one day the pain would pass. But it didn't pass. Quite the contrary, it seemed to grow every day. Until about a year after they started dating, another piece of news came. My sister was pregnant. When I heard that, I felt such a sharp ache in my chest that I had to sit down. Everyone was celebrating. My mother cried with happiness. My father said he was finally going to be a grandfather. Sandro couldn't hide his smile. And I just watched everything in silence. On the inside, I was completely destroyed. I confess I felt envious, not of the pregnancy, but of the life she was living. She was the one building the family I had once imagined building by his side. She was the one carrying the child of the man I still loved. How many times I had imagined what it would be like if that baby were mine. How many times I dreamed of starting a family with Sandro. But that dream never happened. A short time later, the two of them decided to move in together. They rented a house and moved out. When I saw the moving truck taking the furniture away, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. On the one hand, I wouldn't have to see them every day anymore. On the other, it was as if I was witnessing the definitive end of the story I had always dreamed of living. The house in front was left empty. Silence took over that place where everything had started. Even so, the memories remained alive. Every time I looked at that gate, I remembered the day I saw him arrive on his motorcycle for the first time. I remembered the first smile, the first kiss, the first motorcycle ride, the square, the hugs, the plans I made only inside my head. None of that existed anymore. Time passed. My sister never learned the truth. She never found out that Sandro had been my first love. She never imagined that I had already lived all of that by his side. And Sandro, he never brought up the subject again either. He never apologized. He never tried to explain what happened. He simply moved on with his life as if nothing had ever existed between us. For a long time I kept this story just to myself. It was too heavy a secret. Sometimes I asked myself if I should have told everything right at the beginning. Maybe my sister would have understood. Maybe things would have been different, or maybe not. The truth is, I'll never know. Today, I understand that some wounds take a long time to heal. There are loves that end. There are loves that turn into memories, and there are those that remain alive only inside the heart of the one who lived them. Sandro was my first love, my first kiss, the first man of my life. And precisely because of that, forgetting him was much harder than I had imagined. I no longer harbor any hatred toward my sister. She never knew anything. I also can't say that Sandro never felt anything real for me. Maybe he did, maybe not. The fact is that he made his choice, and I had to learn in the most painful way possible that the first love isn't always the love that stays. Today, when I look back, I realize that the 18-year-old girl believed the world would end because of that heartbreak. But time teaches us. It doesn't completely erase the pain. It doesn't make us forget, but it helps us move forward. Some scars remain forever, not because they still hurt, but because they remind us of the person we once were. And this story, it was the greatest lesson of love, loss, and maturity that life could have given me.